Russia has been tightening its military grip around Ukraine since last year. It's been massing hundreds of thousands of troops as well as equipment and artillery on Ukraine's doorstep. You can see where those troops are based on where those red dots happen to be. And after months of military buildup and brinksmanship, Russia started ratcheting up pressure on its ex-Soviet neighbor, threatening to destabilize Europe and draw in the United States. And Putin just recognized two parts of sovereign Ukraine as independent. They're highlighted right there in the orange. Now, there have been a whirlwind of diplomatic efforts in recent weeks, but they've failed to diffuse tensions in the region. Is diplomacy still possible? How far will Putin go? Joining me on the morning show is someone who knows foreign policy very well. My friend Nancy Soderberg, former UN ambassador and director of the Public Service Leadership Program at UNF, joining us live from Kosovo. Good morning.
Good morning.
Calling this an invasion, President Biden said, "Who in the Lord's name does Putin think gives him the right to declare new so-called countries on territory that belong to his neighbors? This is a flagrant violation of international law." How far do you think Putin is going to go?
Well, I think Putin is testing the West. He has amassed enough troops to be able to invade the entire country, but then faced a wall of tough sanctions, unprecedented sanctions, including gas and banking, targeting the leadership between both the U.S. and the EU. And that brick wall of sanctions, I think, made him blink and say, well, maybe I won't go all the way to Kiev. I'll just do this smaller invasion of a sovereign territory for the second time. He did it in 2014. And he's going to face another wall. We'll see if he actually backs down or not. It's a very tense situation. Anything could happen any moment.
You talked about 2014. That would be Crimea. So let me pick up on something you just mentioned. There are sanctions in place, but these are just the beginning. The trump card may be from the EU and SWIFT, making it difficult for financial institutions to send money in and out of the country. Is that enough of a shock to stop Putin?
We don't know. What we do know is the threat of the nuclear option. The SWIFT banking is basically kicking Russia out of the Western banking system, turning off that Nord Stream gas pipeline to Germany. The fact that we've agreed to sort of say this is what you're going to face if you do this has given him pause. What he's doing is testing the West to see whether he can cut Europe off and have lesser sanctions. If he goes in and takes the Donbass region, I think he'll face that wall. Whether he's actually going to send his troops in, I think he's still trying to weigh the consequences. And why is he doing this? He's got this delusional impression that he's going to be the new czar of the former Soviet Russian glory. And facts don't seem to really affect his calculation here, except when it hits his pocketbook. And these sanctions will hit his pocketbook. And I think he's likely to go in. All the indications are that he's going to go in. How far he'll go in is an open question. Whether he steps back from the brink at the last moment, in a moment of sanity, highly unlikely. Most likely is that he'll go in and take the Western Donbass region and face a wall of sanctions from the US and the EU. And we're all going to pay the price in this. This is going to destabilize energy markets. It's going to destabilize the stock market. Nothing as good is going to come out of this if he goes forward, but the West has to act.
There are those who believe that diplomacy is still a possibility. What would appease Putin and be palatable for both sides?
Well, I don't think we're at the stage of trying to appease Putin. This is a man who's invaded Crimea in 2014. He's also done the same thing in Georgia. No one talks about that. And now he's, as President Biden said, trying to pretend that he can declare that these regions in Ukraine are all of a sudden independent countries and then send in troops to protect them from a non-existent threat. That doesn't work in the 21st century, in the year 2022. So if he decides that he's going to still go ahead and do this, he will face unprecedented sanctions and costs. And it's clear that the U.S. and the West are willing to take a stand on this, even if it costs our pocketbooks a little bit, to make sure that he won't stop here. He'll keep going through as much as he can in Europe. I'm in the Balkans right now. They're trying to destabilize the Balkans. They're trying to destabilize democracy throughout Europe. And a lot of polls show that it's working. So we need to make sure that we take a very firm stand and send him an unequivocal message that this will not stand. He may still do it. He's got the troops and the forces to move literally any moment.
You got to wonder if Putin is living in 2022. If this is not resolved, the end result could be a bloody war that changes the face of Europe. Because as you said before when we chatted, Putin's ultimate goal is to reassemble the former USSR. And he's using a warped view of history to make his case. Is this a protracted issue, or do you believe we could see a fairly quick resolution?
Oh, I think as long as President Putin is in office, he's going to keep trying to push the West. So no, this is not the end of this. And even if we are able to stand down on the Ukraine and he pulls his forces back and makes it clear he's not going to go into Ukraine, a highly unlikely scenario, he's going to keep pushing and prodding, which is why the West has to take a very strong stance on this one and stand up to Putin wherever he is trying to prod Western weaknesses. This is not going to end here.
Is he also testing President Biden?
Absolutely. And I think he's found a brick wall there, and a brick wall with I think the US and Europe have worked very well together. You've had diplomacy from the French, the Germans, the US. We're all trying to send one clear message, and I think that's getting through. Diplomacy is never dead. People can always step back from the brink. They can go in and step back. So diplomacy will absolutely remain part of this. But if the President Putin has decided to go into Ukraine, there's really not that much to talk about. We just have to make sure that he feels a very tough stick for those actions.
Nancy Soderberg, as always, appreciate your valuable insights. Have a great day.